I'm Claire, 28 years old, working hard together with my husband to make a living. My husband, Scott, is 33 years old, 5 years older than me. I was attracted to his calm personality and decided to marry him. However, my mother-in-law was very concerned about our age difference. Because of her, I had some tough experiences. When I married my husband, he was very happy. As an older wife who firmly managed the household, I was highly praised by relatives. She would say, "We started a new life in an apartment soon after getting married, but my mother-in-law visited us almost every week by train. Each time we met, she would boast about being older than her husband and being praised for it. Her pride seems to be in supporting my husband well. Every time she came to boast, I felt irritation inside. Moreover, she not only bragged but began to belittle me by comparing me to herself. In our younger days, wives quit their jobs immediately after marriage to become homemakers. Aren't you planning to quit, Claire? Or are you continuing to work because you're young and unsatisfied with just my son? Seeking to play around outside?" She insinuated that I was unfaithful. I am not the kind of person to have inappropriate relationships with other men while being married. It was very painful to be thought of in that way by my mother-in-law. Even witnessing these words from her, Scott did not intervene between us. He just sat on the sofa, playing with his smartphone. I thought he was very responsible, which is why I married him, but he was not fulfilling his responsibilities at home as I imagined. I am responsible for most of the housework. Since we both work, he seems to think we should share housework and occasionally helps me with simple tasks. However, his rare assistance is inefficient and poorly executed. Even if he cooks, the dishes pile up, the laundry gets color-stained, and he carelessly folds it. When he cleans, the room often ends up messier. I have to tidy up after him, but Scott seems unhappy with this. "Why do you redo what I worked hard on?" He shows irritation. Initially, I advised him this method works better, but that seemed to irritate him more. He dislikes following my directions, saying, "Stop nagging. I'll do it my way." Ultimately, it would have been better if he had followed my advice, but he never seemed to reflect on this. My mother-in-law has witnessed this several times and laughs, saying, "It's tough when you're young, and your husband doesn't listen. You can't assert yourself, and can't control him." It's clear that she looks down on me for being younger than my husband. But does she realize her son is a selfish and disobedient husband? After my mother-in-law leaves, Scott, red-faced, yells, "You embarrassed me in front of Mom. Do you want to shame me?" He seems to have finally realized that his mother was subtly belittling him. Hearing this, I wanted to respond, "It's your fault for being stubborn and not growing up. If you don't want to be criticized, act responsibly," I said, but he lamented, "I should have listened to Mom and chosen an older wife." Shocked, I asked, "What do you mean? Are you saying our marriage was a mistake?" He replied, "Yes, marrying you was a mistake. I wanted to surprise everyone by marrying a younger wife, but everyone said the 5-year age difference wasn't significant, so it wasn't worth it." It seems Scott chose me to boast about having a younger wife. I was astonished to learn he had such a motive for marriage. I responded to his courtship, attracted by his responsible demeanor and gentle escorting, but it was all an act to marry me. In the US, polygamy is not allowed. As long as Scott is legally married to me, marrying another woman is absolutely impossible. Nevertheless, he proudly declared, "I've decided to follow Mom's advice and marry an older, more mature wife. Olivia has always lived near my parents' home and is a reliable, big sister type. That's why I thought marrying her, a mature woman, would be better than marrying an inexperienced younger woman like you." Scott admitted he considered our marriage a failure, but I thought it was too soon for him to be looking for someone else. Moreover, planning another marriage while still married to me is unthinkable. This is clearly adultery. I was dumbfounded. Seeing my reaction, my mother-in-law started laughing. "You thought you wouldn't be abandoned by a man because you're young? But you're wrong. You come home later than Scott every day, So people think you're playing around with other men. You can say anything even if your husband turns to another woman. But I told you I'm working. I'm not playing around with other men. I replied, it seems my mother-in-law really wants to believe I'm having an affair. Does she think it's okay for her son to brazenly admit to adultery because she's convinced I'm unfaithful? Maybe she's not worried about compensation for her son's affair because she's mistaken about me having one. I'm not having an affair, and if Scott is having one with Olivia, I definitely plan to seek compensation. Excuse me, but I will ask for the usual compensation for adultery. Is that okay? I said, and my mother-in-law laughed loudly. If you do that, we will demand compensation from you. Your late return to home itself is proof of adultery. She retorted, oh, is that so? Then please consult a lawyer. I wonder if they'll take your case with that argument. I replied, and my mother-in-law left grumpily, saying, you'll regret this later. However, compensation isn't my only concern. Later, Scott and my mother-in-law brought Olivia to our house, and with his arm around her shoulder, Scott said, from now on, I plan to live in this apartment with Olivia. So, please pack your things and leave quickly. Why do I have to leave? Because this apartment is mine. Isn't that obvious? Scott said, but in reality, the apartment is in my name. I couldn't understand why he would say such a thing. This spacious apartment is unnecessary for you, right? That's why I'm saying, give it to me, he claimed. I was momentarily shocked that he told me to leave, forgetting I'm the owner, but it seemed he remembered the apartment was in my name. However, I doubted whether Scott had the ability to pay the rent. As I thought about his income, my mother enlarged me. We don't need a useless daughter-in-law like you. My son has found a wealthy wife, so leave quickly as you're told. Looking at Olivia, she had a confident expression, and I realized she would be paying the rent from now on. If that's the case, let the new wife take care of the rent. With that thought, I quickly started the procedures for changing the ownership. Olivia was a puzzling person but seemed to work for a large company, which surprised me. I understood why my husband and mother-in-law chose Olivia, financially well-off and an older, long-term acquaintance, over me. As I also wanted a divorce, I happily signed the divorce papers presented to me and left the rest of the procedures to them. I quickly organized my belongings and hired movers to take out my furniture, including the ones I bought. I took the necessary appliances, but Scott and my mother-in-law said, we'll buy new ones so you can take those. These were originally bought by me. After the busy move, I settled into a luxury apartment, but I don't intend to let this end quietly. Of course, I plan to claim compensation based on the facts of the affair and take appropriate action if those three continue living together in that apartment. With that in mind, I contacted my uncle immediately. Hello, uncle. It's been a while. It's Claire. Oh, you already know about the apartment. Yes, I'm getting divorced and have to move out. So, it's okay to return the rent to the original amount. The new wife will be paying, it seems. I was told to leave because they prefer an older wife. Actually, this apartment, though in my name, is owned by my uncle. When Scott and I were looking for a place to live after getting married, there was some room available in my uncle's apartment, and we decided to live there. Thanks to my uncle's consideration, we were living there at a lower rent than usual. I was responsible for the contract and rent payments, while Scott handled other living expenses. The rent I was paying was considerable, but returning to the normal rate meant Scott and Olivia would have to pay $3,500 each month. But Olivia, working for a large corporation, might not have a problem paying $3,500 monthly. That's not something I know for sure. Sometime after the divorce, when I claimed compensation, the amount for both of them was deposited into my account in a lump sum. I thought my involvement with Scott, Olivia, and my mother-in-law had ended, but 6 months later, I unexpectedly encountered Olivia. "Why are you here?" she said in surprise. I was in the elevator when Olivia happened to get on the same one and was startled to see me. You're not planning to join this company, are you? I'm sorry, but it's impossible for you. A competent person like me is one thing, but it's impossible for an incompetent person like you. So, leave. She spat out. Then, as the elevator doors opened, she pushed me out, thrown off balance and wearing heels. I stumbled and sprained my ankle. When the accident happened, people around rushed to help and seated me in a chair. I had a minor injury and felt deep anger towards Olivia, thinking, I can't expect anything more from her. Being injured by someone who completely misunderstood my position and purpose was unexpected. Generally, causing injury to someone else, regardless of the reason, is never acceptable, especially when done at one's workplace. She bragged about being wealthy because she worked for a large corporation, but the reality was different. I had researched her family background while investigating my husband's affair. The research revealed her parents didn't have a significant income. If she lost her job, she wouldn't be able to expect financial support from her parents, making her far from wealthy. Right after she pushed me, Olivia was called by her boss. Why do I have to be called out by my boss because of you? She was outraged. Her actions and words clearly displayed her self-centered nature and lack of understanding. After getting my ankle treated, I was explaining the situation to Olivia's boss in the company's reception room. While I was speaking, Olivia burst into the room, saw me, and, thinking I was the cause of her being called out, showed her anger. Her boss, angered by her attitude, scolded her loudly. What are you thinking? What does this attitude mean? Do you know who this person is? She's the vice president of S Trading, starting business with us from today. Why would you be disrespectful to such an important person? Her boss said. Hearing this, Olivia's eyes widened in shock, her expression showing disbelief. Wait, you're the vice president of S Trading? She asked me, stunned. Scott knew I worked at S Trading, but he never imagined I was the vice president. In fact, I became vice president only 6 months ago, previously holding a high position but not that of a vice president. Scott, captivated by my youth, probably didn't pay much attention to my actual income or status. On the other hand, Olivia, a regular employee at this company, seemed to have a decent income, but it still must have been less than mine. When divorcing, I deliberately didn't mention this fact. Even if I had, it wouldn't have changed the decision to divorce, and I wanted the divorce myself, so there was no need to mention it. With a serious expression, I addressed Olivia. I never imagined you'd be someone who would injure a business partner. Olivia's face turned pale instantly at my words. Surprise and confusion were evident in her expression. Although we know each other, in this situation today, it's as if we're meeting for the first time. So, I expected normal, common sense behavior. I continued calmly. Hearing our conversation, her boss, puzzled, asked, "Excuse me, Vice President, what exactly is your relationship with our employee?" I looked into his eyes and spoke the truth without hiding anything. She is actually the current wife of my ex-husband, Scott. One day when I returned home, she and Scott were there, and Olivia told me to leave the apartment because she was the new wife. At that time, I thought I had no involvement with the company she worked for, so I didn't feel the need to inform them about the affair. However, in a situation like this, I couldn't stay silent. My boss listened to my story, unable to hide his astonishment, and said in confusion, "What does this mean?" Afterwards, he sternly instructed Olivia, "I will definitely report this matter to the management. You will be under disciplinary action for some time. Also, you are responsible for paying for the treatment of the injury." Fortunately, the injury I sustained was minor, and the treatment costs were paid promptly. Olivia's fate took a turn for the worse. She had injured an important vice president from a client company, jeopardizing a significant business deal. As a result of this incident, her credibility at the company rapidly declined. Additionally, her irrational behavior of stealing my husband, Scott, due to an affair, and forcing me out of the apartment greatly damaged the company's trust. The impact of her actions at the company was severe, and as a result, she was assigned to work in the basement storage. Furthermore, this job change led to a significant reduction in her salary, making it difficult for her to pay the monthly rent of $3,500. Olivia and Scott were already living barely within their means before her salary reduction, but their living situation quickly deteriorated after the decrease in income. Later, as Olivia's situation worsened, Scott and my mother-in-law came back to me, proposing that we get back together. However, when I asked, "Is your divorce with Olivia finalized?" Scott fell silent, unable to answer. Incredibly, he had been plotting to remarry me without finalizing his divorce with Olivia. I was astonished by their unreasonable behavior. Disappointed by their repeated actions, I firmly said, "I have no intention of remarrying Scott," and sent them away. Unfortunately, Olivia, Scott, and my mother-in-law lost the comfortable apartment they once lived in and had to move to a smaller, less desirable apartment. Olivia, probably exhausted from her days as a warehouse worker, suddenly quit her job one day, declaring, "I will be a full-time housewife to support our home because I am an older wife." My mother-in-law always bragged about being a stay-at-home wife, so you can't complain about this decision. As a result, Scott, with his modest salary, had to support the three of them, leading to frequent and intense arguments between my mother-in-law and Olivia about who should work, with Scott often getting caught in the middle. Meanwhile, after the divorce, I became single and, as the vice president, felt more responsibility for my work, becoming even more dedicated, freed from the troublesome involvement with people like Scott, Olivia, and my mother-in-law. I can now focus on my career and personal growth. Based on the lessons learned from my past experiences, I decided to keep a distance from relationships and marriage for the time being. I will prioritize my happiness and stability, making wiser choices in my life ahead. "I believe you all understand," began my brother's wife. All eyes turned toward her. She felt their gaze instantly and continued, "We should not be fighting amongst ourselves over our late father's inheritance. I don't think that's what he would have wanted." She looked up at the sky for a moment. Her acting seemed exaggerated. And then she added, "It would be best for my husband, the eldest son, to inherit it for both social reasons and to avoid the conflict that our late father wouldn't have wished for." With satisfaction, she declared that my brother would inherit the estate. Everyone was astonished because, as it turned out, my brother was. Our father passed away peacefully. I believe he had a blissful departure. I am the oldest child at 36, unmarried and enjoying living alone. I have an older brother and a younger sister. Our father once established a well-known company in the area, but now only his name is registered as the nominal president, and my sister and I work there as regular employees. We live in apartments close to our workplace, conveniently located nearby our family home. Our parents are both remarried, and we are children born to our father after he turned 50. From the outside, our family might seem a bit complicated, but we are not children of infidelity. After a formal divorce from his previous wife, our father met and married our mother, who was working in a bar at that time. Despite the age gap, they got along very well and showered us siblings with love equally. To this day, we've been gathering as a family whenever possible, sharing meals and drinks, updating each other on our lives, and spending pleasant times together. As for affection, even after 30 years of marriage, my parents still showed unchanging love, which even as their child, I found wonderful. My father, especially, adored my mother deeply and was always willing to do anything to make her happy. His anniversary surprises were always creative, which made us chuckle but also feel cherished. Although he was strict at the company, he retired and became a gentle and soft presence, like a grandfather. I also have a much older brother who has moved out and started a new life with his wife. Ever since childhood, he's been somewhat enigmatic, rarely committing to anything with perseverance, living as he pleases. Our father was deeply concerned about his future. However, my brother remained oblivious to these concerns, wandering aimlessly as ever. He left home out of the blue, brought home his current wife, and announced, "I'm engaged." The impression I had when I first met her, unfortunately, was not very good. She might be the bright and candid type. However, her remarks often carried a certain sharpness, and I felt they were somewhat disdainful. Nevertheless, my parents did not oppose the marriage, thinking, since she's the partner our son has chosen. My sister and I also refrained from commenting, hoping that this marriage would bring stability to our brother. At that time, our father was already over 80 years old. Years passed. One morning, my mother informed us that our father had collapsed during his routine walk and was rushed to the hospital in a critical condition. He had always walked for 30 minutes every morning for his health. Even though he used a cane, these walks were an essential part of his daily routine after retirement. That day was no different, and he went out as my mother started preparing breakfast. When he did not return at the usual time, my mother felt anxious. As she checked outside, a neighbor hurried over and breathlessly informed her, "Your husband has collapsed. He's being carried to the ambulance." My mother immediately rushed to the scene and joined him in the ambulance to the hospital. Soon after, I was contacted by the hospital. In a panic, I informed my brother and sister of the situation. Then, after telling my boss, I quickly headed to the hospital. When I arrived, my father was still receiving emergency treatment. My mother sat quietly in the waiting room chair as if nothing had happened. I sat next to her and patted her shoulder, praying for my father's well-being. My sister arrived shortly after, and we sat in silence, anxiously waiting for the outcome of my father's treatment. Sadly, he passed away shortly after. Considering his age, it could be said that he had lived a full life. My father had always jokingly said he wanted to leave this world suddenly, and that's exactly what happened. The situation was complex. In the end, neither my brother nor his wife showed up at the hospital. The company organized my father's funeral. The preparations were made by the staff, and we, the family, were too busy to take time to mourn. My mother appeared composed, too occupied with greeting the attendees to indulge in grief. The business seemed appropriate for her at the time. They were truly a loving couple. After the hectic 3 days, we finally slept, as if making up for the lack of rest we had endured. The day after the funeral, relatives gathered to discuss my late father's assets. Since my father only held an honorary position at the company, its operation remained unchanged. However, my father's private assets were substantial, totaling $7 million. It was expected that the reading of the will and the distribution of mementos would lead to nostalgic conversations. However, that thought was short-lived. An unexpected turn of events then occurred. Unexpectedly, my sister-in-law, who had been out of sight for a long time, suddenly gathered everyone's attention and powerfully announced, "There is something I must tell you all." Then she began to speak. "You may already be aware of this, but..." As the family turned their attention to her, she looked around and said, "This is about the assets left by our late father. It is hard to believe that he would have wanted any disputes among siblings over this." At that moment, she looked up toward the sky, perhaps feigning tears. Her performance seemed somewhat exaggerated to those present. She went on, "It is best, for social reasons and to avoid any discord against the wishes of our dear father, that my husband as the eldest son inherits everything. There will be no objections. Is that clear?" She proudly made her declaration. The sudden claim left everyone stunned, including my mother, sister, and the executor of the will. When my gaze shifted to my brother, I saw him sitting alone in the corner, drinking. It was unbelievable. At that moment, the lawyer, a legal professional, questioned my sister-in-law's claim and raised an eyebrow. There was a reason for his doubt. Standing up, the lawyer firmly stated, "That cannot be done." My sister-in-law retorted angrily, "Don't say unnecessary things." But she was an outsider in this matter. The lawyer, trusted by my father during his lifetime, calmly countered her. "My duty is to clarify and execute the final wishes of the deceased." He then revealed a crucial fact. In this matter, the eldest son actually has no right to the inheritance. It turned out my brother was the son of my mother's previous husband and had no blood relation to our father. My father had once proposed adoption to my mother, but she declined, saying that it was enough for them to raise him as their son and that he might cause problems in the future financially. Also, she was already pregnant with me in her womb. Throughout our lives, our parents showered us with love without distinction, and our father was always willing to invest in what we wanted. However, as my mother predicted, my brother's life did not extend beyond completing his college education. Afterward, my brother, who had proclaimed his desire to be a musician, spent his time idly in the UK under the guise of training, and upon returning to the US, he never held a job for long, always relying on our father for money whenever he was in financial difficulty. When my sister-in-law learned of this fact, she screamed in outrage, "This is a joke. I married him thinking he was the son of a wealthy man." Then she confronted my brother, lashed out, and accused him, "You deceived me. I can't forgive this," while attempting to hit and kick him. Fueled by indignation toward her, I stood up and said, "Have some shame. How can you speak of avoiding disputes here in front of everyone when your intention to monopolize the inheritance is clear? Blood-related or not, he's our brother, and I will not stand by and watch him be attacked. Thieves should leave." She then turned her aggression toward me. I braced for a blow, but something unexpected happened. With a loud bang, she vanished from our sight. My brother stood there, breathing deeply. He quietly whispered to me, "Sorry, I'll handle this from now on," and took her by the hair, calmly leading her out of the room. The lawyer then read the will, which stated, "Please follow the inheritance laws as a principle. However, when it comes to the inheritance for the children, divide it among the three of them. This is my request to my wife. I wish for the family to live together in harmony. That's my only wish. I'll watch over all of you from above." My mother turned to us and asked, "What shall we do?" My sister and I already had the answer in our hearts. "Let's do as father wished," we replied with a smile. About a month later, my brother visited the family home alone. He and his wife had ended their marriage without any division of property. His ex-wife continued to complain of being deceived, but my brother insisted he never pretended to be a wealthy heir. It seemed she had misunderstood on her own. I heard that she is now making her living in the nightlife industry, which was where they had met. This incident turned out to be a significant turning point for my brother. Although it's not certain yet, he seems to be working earnestly at a logistics company, aiming to become a full-time employee. He now brings local specialties to the family home, saying, "It's a present for you, Mom." It's a stark contrast to only returning home when he was in need of money in the past. If our father could see this, he would surely be deeply satisfied, as his final wish was for the family to support each other and live in harmony.